It is so nice to be watching a real episode again instead of reconstructions. Welcome to the Time Treadmill. I'm Ron, and these are my sweaty thoughts about Doctor Who. The most immediate interesting thing to me about the arc is that it's the first story in Doctor Who to focus on the great human diaspora. This is a subject that gets returned to again and again over the life of the series. At some point, millions of years in the future, Earth becomes completely uninhabitable, and the human race flees to the stars in giant ark vessels, containing the last of humanity along with other animals and plant life and things necessary for life to begin anew on a new planet. Just off the top of my head, this concept shows up again in other stories like the Fourth Doctor era with Ark in Space. The Ninth Doctor has a story about the destruction of Earth itself. The 11th Doctor episode, The Beast Below, takes place on one of these Ark ships. And even the 12th Doctor episode, Smile, is set on a planetary destination of one of these Ark ships. It's a concept that appears again and again, and it's one of the great subtle through lines in all of Doctor Who history. So here we are in the first Ark story with the Doctor, Stephen, and Dodo arriving on an Ark ship and inadvertently unleashing a plague upon the inhabitants. You see, Dodo has a common cold. Unfortunately, the humans on this Ark ship are from a point millions of years in the future where a common cold no longer exists, and so they have no immunity to it. And so the plague spreads like a wildfire among the population. Also on board the ship is another alien race called the Monoid, who joined the Great Human Expedition at some point several generations ago. And the plague runs through their population as well. As humans and Monoids start dying from this plague, the Doctor and Stephen and Dodo are put on trial for crimes against humanity. Great. Space trial. I hate space trials. Fortunately, that's a very minor part of the story. Now, the particularly nice thing about the structure of this story is that although the arc is a 4-part story, the first 2 episodes that I watched this morning tell one distinct story in one time period. It ends with the Doctor and companions getting in the TARDIS and leaving, and winding up back on the very same arc ship 700 years in the future where something has gone horribly wrong. So that means today I get a nice complete story, and tomorrow I get a nice complete story, and they're both linked, but each of the 2 episode arcs stand on their own as well. Makes for nice viewing. The other interesting thing to talk about in this story is accents, and in particular, Dodo's accent. You see, the BBC in that era had a policy that all characters had to speak what was called BBC English, which is a sort of neutral, middle ground English accent, as opposed to all the various regional accents that naturally occur throughout the United Kingdom. Now, BBC English is not quite received pronunciation. It's not that very posh accent. It's definitely a sort of neutral, middle ground sort of accent that uniquely doesn't actually appear anywhere in the natural population. It's just sort of an amalgam and leveling of all the different accents put together. In that sense, it's not unlike the artificial American accent that was prominent in radio and film in the 1940s and 50s and commonly referred to as a mid-Atlantic accent. Just picture any old-timey radio program and that fake, not quite English accent that you hear in them. That's the mid-Atlantic accent. So the reason I bring that up here is that the character of Dodo was originally supposed to have a Cockney accent. And as you watch her stories, her accent changes wildly from episode to episode. When she first appeared at the tail end of the massacre, she had the standard BBC accent. But then when they were filming the Ark, she used a Cockney accent. And the notable thing here is the Ark is the very first Doctor Who story that was actually filmed out of sequence. So up until now, every single episode has been filmed in blocks in the order that things were aired. With the Ark, the filming schedule was built around sets. And so the first several things that were filmed with Dodo, she had a Cockney accent. And when the BBC brass saw that, they objected strenuously. The BBC had an absolute policy that all characters had to speak BBC English. And so midway through the story, she had to change accents back to a straight BBC English accent. And that required a couple of patch-in scenes of the Doctor scolding her about her accent and promising to teach her to speak proper English. And so, for today and tomorrow, her accent swings wildly back and forth before landing back on a straight BBC accent in future stories. And that also proves how smart writers can get around any problem with just a little bit of tap dancing and a smart bit of dialogue. So that's all I have for you today. Tomorrow I will finish the arc, and I will see you then.